Good afternoon. I am Vanessa Thomas with the 12 o'clock news on the street 919 FM and online Facebook and YouTube. In the headlines, the Agriculture Minister assures the population that his ministry will successfully manage any food shortages in the country. Over 100 workers to be retrenched at Unilever as production is expected to cease in TNT in July. Drivers warn of protest if fuel subsidy is removed, and internationally $4.3 billion needed to combat Yemen's food crisis, says the United Nations. And now the news in detail. Agriculture Minister Clarence Rambarat is assuring citizens that his ministry will successfully manage any food shortages that may occur in the country due to the Russian-Ukraine war and the scarcity of wheat flour. When asked whether the government had a food contingency plan in place in light of the United Nations Food Agency's prediction of a 22% hike in food and feed prices, Rambarat said the government has successfully managed the availability of food to the country during the border closure, during COVID restrictions, curfews, and other impacts of COVID-19, and they will continue to manage. In justifying the projected 22% food price hike, the United Nations Food Agency said Russia was the world's largest exporter of wheat and Ukraine was the fifth largest. Local farmers in TNT, meanwhile, have given an assurance that if there is a food crisis, they stand ready to help. In other news, over 100 workers at Unilever may be out of a job at the end of July after the company confirmed it would cease production in TNT. In a notice on Monday, Unilever confirmed that its supply agreement with a third party, which came into effect in 2018 as a key part of its global strategy, would come to an end on July 31st, 2022. Unilever said as a result, all manufacturing and production in Trinidad will cease. According to a representative at OWTU, workers have already been informed of the situation. 119 unionized workers and an unknown number of non-unionized workers would be affected as a result. In more news, the Trinidad and Tobago Taxi Drivers Association is warning of protest and a drastic increase in taxi fares if the fuel subsidy is removed. Last week, the Prime Minister indicated that with worldwide changes in the price of oil, the cost of maintaining the fuel subsidy has become difficult. In response to this, the association's president, Adrian Acosta, said the Prime Minister has brought a lot of anxiety to taxi drivers. Acosta said if fuel subsidy is removed, taxi drivers will have no choice but to do some adjustments to their fares, as drivers will not at no point in time be taking that burden on their shoulders. Pointing out that taxi drivers have already suffered considerable losses since the start of the pandemic, Acosta noted that drivers have now come out of a 2-year drought and are now looking to get back on their feet. So, for the government to now come at any point in time and take away this fuel subsidy, Acosta warned that it will have a very negative impact on the traveling public. Internationally, the United Nations has stressed that $4.3 billion is needed to address Yemen's food shortages this year and to prevent 19 million people from going hungry. The UN says 3 out of 4 Yemenis will depend on food assistance in 2022. It said so ahead of a high-level pledging conference that aims to raise funds for the war-torn country. The UN hopes that attendees at the conference will meet that goal on Wednesday in Geneva. At the beginning of the year, the UN's World Food Programme was forced to reduce food rations for 8 million people due to a funding shortage, with households receiving barely half of the World Food Programme's standard of the daily minimum food basket. Now, the shortage of funds is putting 5 million more people at risk of slipping into famine-like conditions, the UN said. And that was the 12 o'clock news on the street 919 FM and online Facebook and YouTube. Recapping the headlines, the Agriculture Minister assures the population that his ministry will successfully manage any food shortages in the country. Over 100 workers to be retrenched at Unilever as production is expected to cease in TNT in July. Drivers warn of protest if fuel subsidy is removed, and internationally $4.3 billion needed to combat Yemen's food crisis, says the United Nations. Do enjoy your afternoon and continue to be safe. I am Vanessa Thomas.